And we will go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome. And this session is being recorded. My name is Tawana Parner, and I will be the moderator for this ADEIL conference. Before we begin, on behalf of ADEIL, we'd like to thank our host school, Troy University, and our technical coordinator, Marcy Shirley, also from Troy University. We are thankful for their contribution in making this event possible. Some housekeeping rules that we just want to go over. If you have a question, please feel free to put your question in the chat and we will acknowledge you, or you can raise your hand and we will acknowledge you that way as well. Also, we ask that you put your full first and last name and your email address at this chat at this time. And finally, we are going to request that each of you complete a conference evaluation that will be placed in the chat. And now let me introduce our speaker for today. Anna Redstone is the lead for Universal Design and Accessibility in Program Experience Strategy team at Western Governors University. She holds a PhD in instructional design and technology and has over a decade of experience creating engaging and inclusive courses and providing faculty development. And at this time, I present Anna.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm really happy that you're here. I'm an accessibility and UDL advocate, so in the interest of being inclusive, I will introduce myself to those who are not able to see me. I am a middle-aged white and Hispanic woman with light skin, shoulder-length brown hair, and eyes, and I'm wearing a dark patterned blouse. I have on glasses, but no jewelry. And I welcome you to today's session. What we're going to talk about today is here on the overview. We're going to have a quick UDL refresher and talk briefly about the 3.0 UDL updates. Then we'll talk about the background of the UDL collaboration model. We'll talk about the actual redesign cycle for online classes, some recommendations for researchers and educators, and finally, at the end, we'll have time for discussion and questions. All right, UDL is a framework that is designed to create, by the way, this is just kind of setting the stage, just a quick refresher so everybody kind of remembers what UDL is. It's a framework designed to create learning environments that are accessible, inclusive, and challenging for every learner. So you can see on this slide, there's a graphic that illustrates the three principles of the UDL framework that are intended to support learner agency. Multiple means of representation, engagement, and multiple means of action and expression. You'll see there's also a notation at the end that all of these lead to learner agency, and that is new actually for the new 3.0 guidelines that came out. Previously, the goal for UDL was expert learners, but I think that these goals are very similar because they both really involve promoting self-regulated learning. So I'm going to briefly touch on the 3.0 guidelines on the next slide because I think they're relevant to our discussion today. But first, I want to just quickly describe each of the principles. And as I'm going through this, I want you to reflect on how you implement UDL in the work that you do. And then we will have a little bit of time at the end to talk about that. All right, so for representation, people learn and understand information in many different ways. So for example, those with sensory challenges like blindness or deafness, or learning disabilities or dyslexia, or those who come from diverse cultures, speak different languages, they all interact with content in unique ways. So it's really crucial to recognize and respect these different approaches. It's also important to consider how people, cultures, identities, perspectives, and ways of knowing are reflected in the material. So with multiple means of engagement, emotions play a big role in learning. And so what excites or motivates one learner can be completely different for another learner. Learners really need to feel like they can bring their true selves into the learning environment and connect with their learning to what matters the most in their lives. And UDL really highlights the idea of learner variability and understanding that learners have different intersecting ideas is key to truly embracing this concept. And then finally, the multiple means of action and representations. Learners have different ways, as we all know, learners have different ways of navigating a learning environment, of tackling tasks and assignments and really showing what they know. So that's why it's so important to design learning experiences that respect and support these differences. All right, so let's move on to quickly talk about the UDL 3.0 changes. This was just put out in July of this year. And so this is kind of a summary of the updates that are based on cognitive science, emotional regulation, cultural responsiveness influences on the guidelines. So you can see here that equity and social justice are highlighted. There's more emphasis on learner agency and the co-design of learning experiences, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And also more inclusive language that reflects asset-based or strength-based approaches to different learner differences. There's also more focus on systemic barriers rather than individual barriers. One of the things that you will need to do when you're planning to incorporate the UDL into your redesigned online course is to become familiar with UDL principles and guidelines and checkpoints. So I encourage you to go to the CAST website and explore all of these changes. And I think that there will be a link. Tawana is going to add a link to the CAST website. I think it's here, or it might be coming up in a couple slides. I don't remember, but I encourage you to visit there. All right, so I just want to give you a little bit of background on how I developed this model of collaboration between the ID, which is the instructional designer, and the faculty member. So I created this model as I was completing my dissertation last year. What I did was I took a computer science course. It was at a mid-sized public research institution. And so I took two sections, as you can see here on the screen. There was a comparison course, which was just the original course that had 14 modules. It had embedded PDFs, but really no other learning materials. There was no multimedia, and there's no interaction really between learners. And so I didn't make any changes to that course. And then I did redesign, with the help of the course instructor, the faculty member, redesigned the treatment course so that I could examine differences between them. So as I was thinking through how to redesign this course, I was thinking, where do I start? What do I focus on? And then what's possible within a time frame, a reasonable time frame, and then what is feasible. Just a couple other notes about the two courses. They were, as I mentioned, they were computer science courses. They were 300 level. There were asynchronous online courses that the instructor had taught previously for many years. There were no synchronous elements in the course, and it was designed originally in Canvas by the course instructor without the help of an instructional designer, and the instructor at the beginning was unfamiliar with UDL principles. So in my research, I looked for help. And so this is what I found. This is Kavita Rao's 2021 UDL design cycle. And it was originally created based on an earlier version that she and her co-researchers developed for K through 12 classroom lessons. Later on in this publication, which I think Tawana is putting into the chat for you, she talks about using this for online classes as well. So I looked at this cycle and thought about the how I have worked collaboratively with faculty over the last decade, and really thought about how to capitalize on that collaboration and use that to incorporate UDL principles. So here is the redesign cycle that I created. You can see it is similar. It has some similarities with the previous design cycle, but this is really focused on higher education and online learning. You can see in the chat, there is a link to this publication. This is my publication that just came out earlier this year, I think in June or July. So step one, I'm going to go through each of these steps. Step one is where you talk to the instructor, collaborate with the instructor to talk about the learner variability. Step two, talk to the instructor about what's in the course syllabus, what are the objectives, and very important, what are the previous learning barriers. Step three is to review the course, and this is solely for the instructional designer, as I will explain in a bit. To review the course and the LMS site, in this case it was Canvas, in both the student and instructor roles to really identify any additional potential learning barriers. Step four is where the redesign takes place. Step five is implementing the changes in the UDL-based course. And step six is reflecting and revising based on student and instructor feedback. So let's break down some of these steps. Step one is to discuss the learner variability and I just want to mention here, because I think I skipped over this, the checkpoints that you'll see here in just a minute, these are based on the last version. They're not updated to the 3.0 version, so they're the 2.2 version, but they are, the updates to 3.0 are not, they're not a lot of changes. It's mostly changes to language, but the checkpoint, the meaning of the checkpoints pretty much stay the same. So I just wanted to note that. So here, starting at the top of the cycle, step one is to discuss the abilities, the strengths, the support needs, and preferences and backgrounds of the learners. So for example, in my case, I found out from the instructor that the students were mostly male. They were mostly computer science majors. About a quarter of the students spoke a native language that was not English. They were mostly traditional students who were on campus. There were, the instructor said that she only knew of one student who had reported a disability in her decade of teaching, which was really interesting because when I did a survey for this study, I found just in the treatment class, or between the comparison and treatment, I found 3 or 4 who identified as having learning disabilities but did not report them. So that was an interesting finding. But also as I said, most took on-campus courses, and some were not familiar with online courses. They preferred a lot of support, and this instructor was fortunate enough to have the help of a couple of teaching assistants. All right, so in step 2, this is where we reviewed the syllabus, objectives, and barriers. So we looked at the syllabus together, looking at the course objectives. This is something you would do normally in a redesign process. Um, we reviewed the objectives and the whole course together in Canvas. And then this is where the instructor identified learning barriers that she had noticed in the past. So in my example, I found out that there was a lot of confusion about the purpose of the groups. The instructor had formed groups, but the only purpose of the group was really to just share a common due date for assignments. There was no actual group work being done, so that was pretty confusing for students. There were also a lot of questions that took up a lot of the instructor's time and the time of the teaching assistants about how to request different types of support. And there was a lot of confusion about the schedule, the due dates, and assignment expectations. So step 3, this is where I went into Canvas and I went in, first I went in as an instructor and I looked at all the materials and everything that was in there that's available to the instructor. Then I went in as a student and looked at how the course looked in Canvas as a student. I found that there were additional learning barriers, and some examples are listed here. There were the materials were mostly text-based. They were very disorganized. So there was a lot of scrolling learners had to do to get from one section to another. Most of the materials were not accessible. There was no options for learners to really express themselves in different ways. Everything was very text-based. The instructor had minimal teaching presence, and there was really no opportunity for learners to collaborate. So in the next step, step 4, this is where we collaborated to redesign. And I want to stress here that this is really a negotiation, just like with any redesign between an instructional designer and a faculty member. It is a negotiation of what is reasonable, what is able to be done in a timely manner. In this example, we came to an agreement that the blog posts that were used as one of the assessments, the blog post would be turned into collaborative discussion board posts. And the interactions, there would be increased interactions with the instructor and TAs and learners. And then the materials, this was the big one. I wanted to make sure that the modules were organized. The way that it was in the original course was everything was kind of like one big module, which really made it difficult for learners to navigate. I added videos to explain the syllabus, like a syllabus walkthrough, and a video to explain each of the assessments. I added a lot of resources for learner support, and as time allowed, I made the materials accessible. Unfortunately, one of the drawbacks was there were just so many materials that it was impossible in the time frame to make everything accessible in the first redesign attempt. And I just want to emphasize here that you want to start in the redesign, you want to start with the UDL guidelines and the checkpoints, and then think about the information that was gathered in the first 3 steps, and you're really thinking about how to reduce those learner barriers. And remember that UDL is not a checklist. It is a flexible framework. So how I implemented UDL in this example may be really different than how you implement UDL in your online course redesign. It really, again, depends on the information that you gather. All right, so the first thing I just wanted to go over this. I'm not going to go into detail here. If you want to see the how I made how I illustrated the differences between the comparison and the treatment courses. There should be a link in the chat where you can go to that paper that was published earlier this year. There are charts in there and also other graphics that can really give you details about this. But I'm just going to cover the basics here just due to time limitations. So what I changed in the syllabus was the instructors. I added a whole bunch more instructors information with a photo and introductory video. This was not in the original, and it really helped with instructor presence. What you can see here in the parentheses, these are the UDL 2.2 checkpoints that I've listed here that relate to the changes that I made. So that's what that is. Also told students in the syllabus that some of the assessments had a way for them to turn them in different ways. So they could, instead of, for example, with the discussion questions, they could upload a video or audio instead. Provided a lot more course policies with additional support resources, a lot more detailed assignment overviews, included visual maps and videos. Again, you can see examples of that in the paper. Added a course schedule that was color-coded, descriptions of the learning materials and alternatives to the learning materials. So that was one of the things that I did, was add some graphics and videos, accessible graphics and videos to the course. Okay, I'm going to skip over that. The previous slide was just an example. I can go back here. This is in that that article. This is what I was saying that you can go back and look at. I want to kind of skip over that in the interest of time. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one was modules. So we changed the module structure and the pages. I added a syllabus quiz, added module to-do lists and a graphic, added assessment objectives to make sure that the learners saw that there was an alignment to the course objectives. Added in that group collaboration, added the course materials that I just mentioned, and added that direct instruction in terms of videos. All right, and I think I skipped over one. There was also a page on discussions. So I added options, and I will leave this here for you. These are, as you can read these for yourself. And I will provide a copy of these slides. If you're interested, you can add your email address and I will send you slides and you can come back and look at these. But we're going to move ahead to step 5. This is where we implemented the UDL. Instructor released the course and really focused on providing teaching presence and providing feedback and support. And then the last step is where the reflect and revise based on student and instructor feedback. So ways that you can collect learner feedback include mid-semester survey, end of course survey. In my example, I did a semi-structured interview with the instructor. But the idea is that the next time the course is revised, either by the instructional designer or by the course instructor, that these things would be taken into account, and more barriers would be, try to reduce more barriers for the next version of the course. All right, recommendations for research. If you're going to do UDL research, there is a reporting criteria that you can link to, and I think it's also on the references page. There's the design cycle that you have that we looked at earlier, and then the UDL redesign cycle that we have just been looking at. I would recommend, if you're creating a course that's new, that you consider Rouse UDL design cycle. If you are looking to redesign an online course, I recommend using my redesign cycle. Here's some references.
We have 5 minutes.
I know we are coming to end of time, so I would like to ask you all, what questions do you have for me, and how have you implemented UDL in your work? And what are some ways you think you could integrate the UDL redesign cycle for online courses into the work that you do? So please come off mute and speak, or if you put it in the chat, I cannot see your chat, so Tawana will have to help me with that.
Have
Okay, well,
someone posted in the chat. I think
yes.
reviewing your design cycle and thinking about how we can implement it in our process is a great idea.
Great, thank you.
I think a lot of us have some maybe general ideas about UDL, but really thinking about our process and how we can sort of more intentionally use UDL or apply UDL in our process is important.
Thanks. Well, if you have additional questions, you can reach me here at LinkedIn or at my personal Gmail account. I just want to remind everybody what we covered in today's session. We talked about the UDL refresher and briefly about the 3.0 updates. We talked about the background of the model and what spurred me to create that. And then we went through each of the 6 steps of the UDL redesign cycle. We talked about some recommendations for researchers and educators, and then we had a little time for discussion. And if there are no other questions, I would like to thank you for joining me today, and I appreciate your attention.